Hello, welcome back to the channel. The reason for today's video, because I usually don't do commentaries, is I've got something that needs a bit of an introduction. It's a tier 10 new Chinese heavy tank, the 116F3. This is only available on Lesta server, which isn't part of Wargaming. It's the split off Russian server. But I thought I'd show it because it's a very interesting tank in terms of what it does for tier 10 and the stats that it has. Of course, it's also Lesta, which itself is a bit different. So what is this tank? It's a tier 10 Chinese heavy tank. I'll get into its stats in a minute. It was released in a free event, and as you can see, as an EU-based player, I couldn't spend any money in Lesta, so it was available for free quite easily. And you can sell it for 7,500 gold, so no catches there. Before I get into its stats, I'll just show you. There is a version of this tank on the Wargaming side. It hasn't yet released. You can see it on Blitz kit, see its armor and everything. It's a bit of a different tank. It's got completely different stats, as you'll see evidently in a minute. But yeah, if you want to check out the Wargaming version, which hasn't yet released, it's on Blitzkit. So going into its stats, it has 2300 hit points, which is on the lower end for tier 10. You can increase it to 2438, but I've gone with the armor because I think that's quite an important aspect of this tank. 282 meters view range, on the better side. I'll show its armor in a minute. Low camo rating, but that's because I'm a new player and I don't have the crew skill up. Its main, probably most outstanding feature is its quick reload of 8.42 seconds with 480 alpha, which gives it an absolutely insane 3,420 damage per minute. Along with this, it's got good premium damage of 410 and amazing high explosive of 660, along with good high explosive penetration. Its standard pen is quite good, but its premium is lacking, just like the WZ-111-5A. The main downside of this tank is definitely the aim time and dispersion. As you can see here, they're not great. It's also not got great gun handling, and the gun depression is actually very nice at -7, just like the WZ-111-5A. The stats on the mobility are also fairly decent, especially considering its armor, which again I'll show in a minute. 45 top speed and 15 reverse, quite average reverse but great forward speed. 16.6 horsepower per ton, looks really good until you realise its terrain resistances, which are 1.2 and 1.5 on hard and medium terrain respectively. The tank weighs 59 tons, so despite its armor, which again I'll show soon, it's not actually a super heavy. Its traverse speed is fairly average, 32.95 degrees a second, and it's about 26 on medium terrain. Of course this changes with equipment, and it's worth to note Lesta has the old version of the equipment, so engine accelerator still gives 7%, not 5%. Enhanced armor gives 4%, and improved assembly gives 6%. Vertical stabilizer still does 15%, and the gun laying drive does 10%. I've gone with the gun rammer because DPM is the main trait of this tank. That's what makes this such an amazing vehicle. Well, amazing. I'll show some gameplay in a minute, but you can improve the penetration because premium penetration is quite low, but then I just thought, what's the point? Because your strength is in the DPM, you may as well utilize that. So now I'll show the armor. By the way, if you want to look at all the stats of this tank, it is on my website. Just go to guysblitz.com, then find reviews. Go to Lesta tank reviews. This section is quite empty because I haven't updated it yet or added new reviews, but click on the 116F3 and you can just find the review here. So here's the armor versus 252mm of armor piercing penetration and 330mm of heat. So on this side is 252. This is the penetration of an IS-4. Most mediums will also see a similar sort of view, and most heavies will see a similar view on their standard ammo. This is against armor piercing, so you can see it's very strong even on the lower plate, though the middle section is very weak. And you can see even when it turns the hull, its sides are still very strong, and that's not fake red or anything. It will bounce if you shoot its tracks in this position. And that's just because it's got very strong side armor. I believe it's 120mm plus 10mm of space armor and 20mm of track armor. The main weak point when it's side scraping, you can see, is the area right under the turret. That's the turret ring bulge which comes out. And of course the middle bit of the lower plate is quite weak because let me just see. Yeah, the flat mid bar, 155mm, so it's easily HESH penetrated. But the lower and upper areas are very bouncy, as you'll see when switching to premium ammo, which is this view. Even against 330mm of heat penetration, you can see when facing head on, it hardly changes. You need calibrated to make really a big difference. Even against calibrated, the upper plate is 340 to 350mm and the turret is over 380. The weakest point, as you can see when we've switched to heat, is right next to the gun, 330mm. But other than that, it's really very hard to penetrate. And you'll see this in face-hugging enemies and such. It's essentially impossible for enemies to deal with your turret. And when the tank is turned, you can see that there's a bit more of a weak point on the turret, and the hull sides get a bit weaker. But again, it's heat, so there's no point really shooting the tracks just for the risk of bouncing, and the main weak point is still that bulge under the turret. I'll just show very quickly the gun handling stats because that's evident. Base aim time 2.9 seconds, it's one of the worst in tier 10. 0.362 dispersion, again very bad even for its high 480 alpha, and its gun handling is nothing special, 0.2, 0.2, 0.008. And then mobility, as you can see, its terrain resistances are quite poor, even for a heavy tank. So its 16.6 power to weight ratio is reduced down to 13.8 on hard terrain and 11.1 on medium. Note that this is still quite good mobility, especially for the level of armor that this tank has, but it kind of struggles to reach its 45 kilometers top speed sometimes. So now I'll show two battles which I had in the tank recently, and do note this is a new account, so I am facing the quote-unquote noob matchmaker, so take the gameplay with a pinch of salt, because these are newer players and I'm an experienced player. But I just want to show what the tank's capable of, so you'll see it in this gameplay here. Skip forward a bit, just to... You can see that aim time and the poor dispersion makes it very hard to snipe weak points, even the large hatch on the Chieftain Mark 6, and you can see it just fluffs over the top. I'm currently alone on this flank, so I'm thinking about relocating, seeing that two heavies are already spotted on this side, and an FV4005. So here you can see the mobility on hard terrain. It's definitely not fast, but it's not slow either. Going uphill only at 25 kilometers per hour. Here you'll notice the very high DPM and fast reload of the tank coming into play. 480 alpha with a 4.8 second reload is really no joke. Even the IS-8, which has pretty high DPM for a tier 9 tank, stands no chance dealing with this. They bounce right off the side or the front of the lower plate, I'm not sure there. But you can see I'm even out-reloading the IS-8, which has a 420 alpha damage gun with a fast reload in tier 9. And this doing 480 with an even quicker reload. Notice the aim time again here, having to stop and just aim for a really long time while my whole tank is exposed. Not the best play, but it you know, it's the noob matchmaking. So the mistakes aren't punished as much. Here you can see me taking a side scraping position and being hulled down behind the IS-8, making it very hard to deal with the armour of this tank. As once again I showed in the armour profile, the only real weak point when side scraping is that turret ring. I'm flanking behind the enemies, trying to use that DPM again. Takes a while to catch up to them as the T-62A relocates. So I just hit the T-62A with high explosive shell. It didn't show there because I skipped a bit too far, but the high explosive again does 660 alpha on average. With this DPM, that is 4,703 high explosive DPM, which is very formidable for what you can do with tanks like the FV405 or Guerrilla 15. So this game didn't really show the armour that much, but you could see what the DPM is capable of and its brawling capabilities. Almost 5,000 damage, 2,000 blocked. This is a first class game. And a bit of credits made. 1,500 XP. Again, this tank was obtainable completely for free, so even with 1,500 base XP, that's not an ace, since this was obtained by so many people. Just before the next game, I forgot to show, this tank does have a legendary camouflage. It's Major Grom. It was some part of the event theme. You can see it's got some lights on, some additional spaced armor looking stuff, and of course a bit of animations on the rear. But I don't use this camouflage, I like the base look of the tank a bit more. Now on to the next game in Normandy. So this one I was playing with a platoon mate, but that doesn't affect the matchmaker because we're both still in the new player matchmaking. On this one, I choose not to go to base B, the hull down position, despite this being a very good hull down tank, and that's because using its DPM in that position is a bit more difficult when it's against mediums who generally go there, and in this case I saw that enemies had a VK90 and another 116F3, which would be, facing the 116 there would be very hard to deal with. So I decided to go base D. So again you can see the mobility here, even though it's slightly uphill, going completely along the straight, and it's only reaching 32 kilometers per hour. That's the poor terrain resistances coming in, despite this tank having quite good acceleration and top speed. So here you can see I'm hull down, but I'm not quite able to get the 7 degrees of gun depression to work. Preemptively loaded gold there because the lower plate of the VK90 is quite strong, and I don't want to bounce even if it's I've got a chance to penetrate. So I'm just loading gold. And this tank can do that easily because of its crazy DPM. Its gold damage is 410. With an 8.4 second reload, that's still 2,922 DPM, which is higher than the majority of tier 10 heavy tanks. So you can spam gold easily despite your lower gold penetration than most other tanks. But you can see a few misplays on my part here, bouncing gold into the tracks, and missing into the ground. Right now I haven't done much damage, but this is where the massive DPM of the tank really comes into play, and you'll be able to see that soon. Here I'm using the high explosive again, the great 660 damage, and we killed the Badger for almost 900 health in one shot with a fire. poor accuracy there means I miss the M60's lower plate. Most other heavy tanks would have been able to make that shot, especially something like the WZ-111-5A, which this tank shares quite a few things in common with. Though notably this is more of a super heavy armor profile and a slower mobility profile, though it's got the same sort of low hit points at 2300. So here you can see the damage has already gone up to 3700, just about able to shut down the M60, turning around slowly. And now I'm in a 1 versus 4. The 183 misses his Hesh, and now there's a 116 F3 behind me. Go for the kill on the Sheridan, and the other 183 also misses his Hesh. That's due to the space side armor. And one more shot into the 183, and we're up to 5200 damage. So you can see how quickly that game devolved into chaos. After killing the Badger I only had 1300 damage, but at the end of the game, just a minute later, I had 5200. So that's showing you the absolutely crazy damage per minute of this tank. And that game I made a ton of credits because it was a second class, 1400 base XP. Now I'll show you one last game, and this one, it's not as interesting as the others, but it has an 116 F3 on the enemy team, which I face, which you'll be able to see the armor in action with this replay. So I just want to show that quickly. So there's no enemies on this side, flanking using the good top speed, which I finally reach. And then we find a T-57 here. So I go hull down behind this mound, because now he can't penetrate me at all, because the middle and lower plate are hidden. Again, this tank has essentially no hatches or turret weak point, or upper plate weak point. There you can see the enemy 116 F3, and they'll go hull down in just a sec. So you'll be able to see the armor of this tank. And there you can see how hard it is to deal with. I'm not even bothering loading heat because I know my heat penetration is low, and even if it was high, I wouldn't have a better chance of penetrating them. So I'm just trying to go for the hull, which I managed to do there with a high 540 roll. In this case, the DPM isn't really coming into use, but the Alpha is still useful for trading. As you can see there, we did 540 into the enemy tank, which is very nice, something only a gun like this could do with its high 480 Alpha. We haven't got anything quite like that on the wargaming side. The closest is probably the Minotauro with its 490, but that's DPM is nothing like this. So there you can see the armor of the 116, a bit hard to aim for with this tank's poor accuracy, trying to thread the needle between the upper and the lower plate and not bounce or miss. So due to its great combination of armor, top speed and high DPM, it's a very good brawling tank, but it does have some significant downsides, those obviously being its poor accuracy, gun handling and aim time, which are some of the worst in tier 10, and you really notice that. It misses some of the easiest snapshots sometimes, and sometimes it can cause it to lose clutch games, because you just need accuracy sometimes. And here is an example of that. I shoot the tracks of the Batchat and not the hull because of that poor accuracy. Didn't have time to aim, I just had to take the shot. Another downside of this tank is its lower end HP. Despite its good armor, its hit points are only the same as a WZ-113 or 5A, which are on the lower end of tier 10 at 2300. And of course the premium penetration at 303 on heat is also another downside. But you just have to pay for these to gain the absolutely crazy benefits that this tank has, which are its 3400 DPM, 480 Alpha, and high speed, decent mobility and great armour. So hopefully these games and this, well, sort of review has been able to show you the sort of things this tank can do, which we haven't got something like this on Wargaming with such unbalanced level of stats, extreme DPM but low penetration, extremely good armour but fairly unimpressive hit points. It's just overall a incredible good tank, but it definitely has limitations. If you guys want to check out the full review, all the stats and everything, of course, you can see it on my website here. And I do have a different gameplay video which is linked on my website and in the YouTube channel if you guys want to check that one out. So thanks for watching. I might do more videos like this in the future, especially for Lesta, which I feel, since most people don't play it, needs a bit of an introduction. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed it, leave a like, and thanks for watching.